Okay, so what do we do once we actually have created a contact list and we've built out that contact list? The thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we have that we're ready to actually make some cold calls or ready to do some outreach. So you're going to want to create and practice a pitch. So something to think about before we get going too deep into this is think about what is your goal when you're actually trying to do this kind of outreach. Oftentimes when people are doing this outreach and they're not familiar with networking or not familiar with what they should do, they kind of just go blunt force right into the experience, which is like, I'm looking for a job, so my goal is to look for a job and ask about a job. Well, really what you should be doing is think of this as your objective initially is to get a name and a contact record associated with that name. So that's an email or a phone number. So I want a name of somebody who's involved in hiring, and I want a contact, some form of contact, email or phone number. That's what the goal is going to be. And I'll use this example here, which is like, imagine that you're going out to a bar and you're trying to meet somebody, right? You're not just going to show up and immediately ask to take that person home, right? You're going to go in and be like, tell me more about yourself. You try to have a conversation with that person. It's the same kind of concept here. You're not going in and just like starting with the full objective. What you're trying to do is you're trying to develop a relationship with someone, right? So it's a softer approach and it's a more successful approach. So let's talk about some of these different basics when it comes to cold calling or cold emailing. Okay, so some of the not great stuff that people usually fall back on whenever they're doing this is, um, so it's not about like just spilling out your resume, right? You're not reading out your resume bullet points. So you don't want to be saying like, "Hey, here's my certifications, here's the total number of hours I have," right? Like that's not where you want to start from when you're doing these cold conversations. And that's usually when you talk to somebody and ask them like, "What's your situation?" That's what they'll do. They'll say like, these are the certifications I have. Here's the total number of hours I have. I'm looking for a job, right? So let's avoid that. And another key piece of this is if you just get on the phone, someone answers and you start talking, you start blurting all that stuff out, right? So don't just start in on your pitch that right at the get-go. All right. So let's look at the better side of this. All right. The better side of this is you want to ask questions and get that other person talking, right? It's not about you talking, it's about them talking and getting them to explain their operation and their business. And so that you keep them on the phone for a long time. So what you want to do is you want to have a good intro, say, asking a question I'm trying to learn more about, or I'm interested in talking to somebody who knows more about whatever it is, right? And then also, if you do get on the phone with somebody who's like a president or a director of operations or chief pilot, something like that, right? You make it through the admin who hands you over to that. Very, very important to ask this question. Hey, is this a good time to chat? Before you start rolling into your pitch, hey, is this a good time to chat? Right? You want to get them, you don't want to just be, they might be in the middle of something and you don't want to just like kind of steamroll into their lives. So, hey, is this a good time to chat? And then what you want to do is a soft approach, which is I have an example here. I'm building my career and looking to understand different options. And then what you're doing is you're putting the question always back on them. So if they're like, what's this all about? Are you looking for work? You're like, yeah, I'm interested in work, but like what I really want to do is I really want to understand your operation. I really want to understand, blah, 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 whatever that is. You push the question back on them. So always revert back to getting them talking. And you'll see on this third tab within this networking tool, here's a bunch of questions. You can add more to this. But again, whatever you have somebody who's trying to bring something to you, like they're trying to push the conversation over onto you, it's always helpful in that first call to just kind of push it back to them with a question. Be like, yeah, of course I'm looking for work. Like, who isn't looking for work? But really, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to understand your operation. Questions, 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 get them talking. If they don't have time, hey, do you have a time later on to talk about it? I'd really love to learn more about your business, right? That way, you're establishing a relationship with them. They're getting them talking and they're actually sharing about their operation. It helps you understand whether or not it's even a good fit. So, hope that helps. The next thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about what do you do when you actually have that contact information.